Right, now the citizens of the country have been taken for a royal ride by the political class, and that's the big topic of discussion and debate right here on the India Development Debate this evening. I'm Supriya Srinath, and joining me in Mumbai is my colleague and co-anchor Sandeep Gurumurthy. Now, in utter disregard for democratic values, the lawmakers continued to disrupt parliamentary proceedings, forcing the Speaker to adjourn the day's business. Just to remind you, this is the 12th straight session of the House that has been washed out without transacting any business, thanks to the unruly behaviour of MPs from both the Treasury as well as the opposition benches. The pandemonium in the House ensured that even the no-confidence motion against the Modi government, sponsored by the Telugu Desam Party, was not taken up for discussion today as well.
For every 1 day washout of the Parliament session, the loss to the Exchequer is 9 crore rupees. In fact, there's been no meaningful discussion in Parliament in the second leg of the budget session, with even the all-important finance bill getting passed through a Guillotin motion, really. The government blames the unruly opposition for the sorry state of affairs, but the opposition parties say there's been no sincere attempt to ensure a smooth functioning of Parliament. Enough is enough. We need more accountability from the people who we vote for, how to make our lawmakers more accountable, who's to be blamed for this logjam in Parliament. That's the topic of discussion tonight on the India Development Debate. Joining us on the show this evening, Nalin Kohli, National Spokesperson of the BJP, Milind Deora of the Congress Party, former Union Minister and Senior Leader of the Congress Party, MB Rajesh, MP at CPM, Sagarika Ghosh, Consulting Editor, Times of India, and Chakshu Roy, Head PRS Legislative Research. Thank you all so much for joining us on this special edition of the India Development Debate. Let me start off with you, Nalin Kohli, since you represent the Treasury benches. What is to explain this sort of a stalemate, this sort of a logjam, where it's almost becoming routine to see the Parliament being adjourned for the day? This is sort of unprecedented. We've seen bitter rivalry, we've seen heated debates, we've seen dharnas, protests and whatnot, but this is becoming a routine. Every day Parliament getting adjourned for the day. What explains this?
I don't know. I really don't have an answer. However, I think I can point out 3-4 things. While the primary responsibility of the smooth conduct of Parliament is with the Treasury or with the government, the opposition is not without responsibility either. It's not a one-way street, because the Parliament is the Parliament of India. And everyone who gets elected there as a member of Parliament or is nominated there in the upper house is taking the oath of the Constitution to serve the people. So it's not a one-way street that, only the government has to serve the people. Everyone has to. Parliament has transacted business, for example, GST, other sessions before this, and the credit goes to everyone who transacts that business. It's not a one-way street again there. The credit is shared when Parliament goes smoothly. In the past, there has been one instance which the opposition likes to bring up, when the BJP and our party specifically used obstructionism as a tool in an unprecedented situation when the 2G scam was there and the demand for a JPC was there. Eventually, the 2G scam, the 122 licenses were cancelled by the Honorable Supreme Court. So that was an unprecedented situation, and therefore an unprecedented response when a logjam took place. Now, what we are seeing currently is that on routine matters also, there is an attempt by the opposition to obstruct. Today, Sushma ji has said it with great pain, and we feel that pain too, that even when we want to make a statement, the minister wants to first inform Parliament and the Lok Sabha that 39 Indians have passed, they are now reported dead in Iraq. Now we have the confirmed news. We want to share it. Even then there was sloganeering, and in this case it was specifically pointed out by Sushma ji that the Congress party led that or was actively participating. Whereas in the Rajya Sabha, the statement could go smoothly, and every Indian, and who is representing India, standing there felt the pain and grief of Indian citizens being killed by ISIS, a global terrorist organization. And now that the news is confirmed, pay tributes to that too. So therefore, when you ask me, who's responsible? I don't know. I can only tell you all the facts and let your viewers decide.
People will turn around and say that those were unprecedented circumstances because you wanted to rake up one scam. There's a PNB scam that has rocked the nation, and this is taxpayers' money that's involved. So perhaps the opposition is justified. But let me be let me be your advocate for a minute and ask the Congress party exactly this question. Milind Deora, you've been not just in the government, you've been a minister in the government. Disruption, yes, was an oft-quoted form of political democracy, but where does the onus for running the house lies? Yes, it lies on the government, but But isn't the opposition responsible as well? There is a reason why they say we are a responsible opposition, because the House has to run. I mean, does any MP today care about the precious legislative hours being lost? This is the 12th day of what seems like a washout.
Supriya, firstly, as someone who's been in Parliament for 10 years in the Lok Sabha, it pains me to see what is happening in Parliament today. And it should pain every citizen of India to know that the Parliament is not working, that ultimately the MPs, regardless of which party they belong to, are not representing their voices in the most august, the highest representative body in our country. Just a quick analogy, I mean, I remember when I was a member of Parliament in 2004 and I first got elected, I remember the most landmark legislation of our government, of UPA 1, was the Right to Information bill. And I had the opportunity to initiate the Right to Information bill at the age of 28. I was one of the youngest MPs to have been given the opportunity to initiate such a landmark legislation. And I was speaking to empty benches. The opposition at the time, my good friend Nalin's party, had chosen to boycott the House. There was no 2G scam at the time. They were boycotting it for various reasons throughout the 10-year term of UPA 1 and UPA 2. And it shamed me that I was talking and addressing empty benches. So I do agree that the responsibility of running the House, the primary responsibility, is on the government. And I do also agree that the opposition has an equal, if not lesser, responsibility of working with the government to do this. But the fact is this, I can give you several examples of when we were in power and the BJP would protest and obstruct and disrupt the House. For instance, I clearly remember when we were proposing FDI in retail. Now, mind you, FDI in retail did not require Parliament sanction. It was subordinate legislation. It could have been done outside of Parliament. But the BJP at the time were obstructing the House. They said, we want a debate, otherwise we won't allow the House to function. An entire session got washed out. And we said, fine, we will work with you because we don't want the House to function. We don't need to go to Parliament for this, but we'll sit down with you, allow the House to function, just so you're happy and the House can function and we can get other legislations through. Now, similarly, if you look at when Narendra Modi became Prime Minister, one of the first legislations that they came about and tried to amend was the land acquisition law. Mind you, it had taken decades for both the BJP and the Congress to achieve some degree of consensus to pass the land acquisition bill, which became an act in 2013 when I was a member of Parliament and I was a minister in the government of India. And what did the government do, the BJP, when they came to power and they wanted to amend it? They didn't go to Parliament with it. They promulgated 3 ordinances for a year and a half. Basically told Parliament, get lost, we don't need to consult you, we don't need your support. We will go ordinance after ordinance with the ultimate aim that one day, sooner or later, in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, if we win enough state elections, we'll take control of the Rajya Sabha and then we can say we don't need your support. So I'm saying, I believe it's in our interest as BJP, Congress, Nalin's a good friend of mine, that we should work together. We should make sure this House functions.
Why is it not happening? I get that point.
There is the issue of the Punjab National Bank scam. There is the issue of the Andhra special status. There is the issue of the no confidence motion, which, mind you, is not being initiated by us. It's being initiated by Narendra Modi's own allies. There is also the issue of the recent deaths in Iraq. There are some serious lapses that need to be answered. So we would like the House to function. Certainly, we would like the government to be held accountable. We would like to question them. But I would only suggest to the BJP and to the government, you have to reach out to your allies. You have to reach out to the opposition.
I take that point. You're saying the government has to reach out to the allies. I take your point.
You can't be an egomaniac.
You
have to reach out.
I take your point. Sagarika, you know, both the BJP and the Congress are taking a high moral ground here. The BJP is saying, you know, don't ask us why the Parliament is not functioning. The Congress says that, you know, you have to reach out to the allies. It's this blame game that you expect. The fact of the matter is that we've had an extremely unproductive session. I mean, this session, for example, 1 minute was spent in the Lok Sabha in this session on legislation, with productivity down to its lowest. The maximum sitting we've had in Lok Sabha post the 5th of March is for 42 minutes. I mean, this is as pathetic as it can get in terms of, you know, what we're getting out of the Parliament. Who is to blame for this sort of a standoff, Sagarika?
Sandeep, all parties are to blame, BJP is to blame, Congress is to blame, the government is to blame, the opposition is to blame. Now, what is the core principle of parliamentary democracy? The core principle of parliamentary democracy is that democracy is manifested in the debates and discussions in parliament. Now, Parliament today has ceased to function as a forum of debate and discussion. The 16th Lok Sabha is virtually dead. This is because the government simply refuses to allow a debate on the no trust motion that has been brought by the TDP and the YSR Congress, refuses to allow a debate on Rafale deal, refuses to allow a debate on farmers' distress, refuses to allow a debate on the Nirav Modi scam. The opposition, for its part, has personalized the battle. If you go to a plenary session and say that, this is a battle of Kaurava and Pandava, this is a Mahabharata, the Modi name is synonymous with corruption, the party president is a murder accused out on bail. When the battle is so personalized, it's clear that the relationship between government and opposition has completely broken down. And how can they do business when the relationship has completely broken down? They simply cannot even find any issue on which to argue. You see, democracy depends on a set of shared norms. Both sides have to agree on a set of conventions, a set of norms, and debate within those norms. You can't seek to annihilate the other side. You can't seek to say that the other side has no right to exist, that the other side simply has to be blown out of the water, only we will exist. Both are taking that position. As far as the government is concerned, it simply doesn't take the opposition seriously in parliament. It's not going to let the opposition have any space in parliament. It's a majority government, and we have been seeing, Supriya and Sandeep, the manner in which the AIA-DMK MPs are rushing into the well of the house every day. Now, the feeling is the government is encouraging these AIA-DMK MPs who are protesting about the Kaveri water dispute. They are going into the house every day, and they are preventing a discussion on the union budget, Supriya and Sandeep. The union budget, it concerns public money.
That's exactly
it's our money. Taxes, we pay
absolutely,
those taxes.
And in fact, it's a huge
what
shame.
Is happening
Absolutely,
to the money that we are paying?
It's a Absolutely. It's a huge shame that the finance bill gets passed without a discussion. I thought the parliament's job was scrutinize, the parliament's job was debate, dissent, discuss, but none of that is happening. It's either decided to become a rubber stamp or it's a rubble rouser. That's what the parliament has perhaps been reduced to. But Chakshu, I'm going to ask you the same question that Sandeep put forward, and the statistics are alarming. I mean, since the 5th of March, the parliament has sat down to do business only for 42 minutes. I mean, what is really going on? Are we making a complete mockery of what is really the temple of democracy, of what is really a system that has withstood the test of times? What have we reduced parliament to?
The numbers of productivity of parliament, be it the upper house or the lower house, show a fairly disturbing trend. One is, the number of minutes it's functioned, is on one side. But what is really happening is that business is getting transacted, without, there being any sense of debate in the house. Now, I'll give you an example. A number of times, we use phrases like, is the mockery of parliament being made? But the real question that we need to ask is, what is the cost to the country, right? And the cost to the country can't really be calculated in terms of money. What it really has to be calculated is the opportunity that is lost when parliament does not function. So if a consumer protection bill is not getting passed, what is the opportunity to all the consumers who have complaints against, companies where they have, taken services or products? If a motor vehicle bill is not being passed, what does it mean for motorists or for people on the ground, where accidents are happening? So disturbances in parliament, adjournments in parliament not functioning has a real cost. And that cost is the cost to the nation and to the citizens when laws are not getting framed or when budget is not getting debated.
That's a very interesting point you're making, and how do we determine that opportunity cost? And that's going to be a staggering figure that will embarrass both the government and the opposition. But Rajesh, while we blame, large part of the blame goes to the BJP and the Congress, one can't forget the role of the other parties. I mean, I understand this fascination of all regional parties and non-BJP, non-Congress parties to form this federal front, the so-called third front that keeps talking about. But what is this united opposition all about? I fail to understand. Opposition hasn't been able to table a no-confidence motion because the same people who supposedly claim to support this third front are the ones who are storming the well and disrupting the house over regional issues. Now, you could argue that these are important issues that need to be addressed in the parliament, but instead of having a debate and discussion, they're jumping to the well and disrupting the parliament. So what is this? Is there any opposition unity at all? Is there any cohesive opposition strategy?
Let me make 3 points to refute your charge that the entire opposition is responsible for this parliament logjam. Number one, even yesterday, our CPIM's floor leader met the speaker and conveyed that we are in favor of the functioning of the House, and we want the House to function because we have given notices of many serious issues, including banking scam, and we want these issues to be discussed on the floor of the House. Number two, I had attended an all-party meeting convened by the speaker at the beginning, and in that all-party meeting, the speaker had suggested that the government should come out with a formula. Government should held talks with various parties and find a solution to this logjam. But since then, the government has not done anything. Even the government has failed to resolve their issues with their own allies. And number three, this protest is a government engineered protest. The government wants to run away from the burning issues. The government doesn't want the issue of banking scam, the issue of Nirav Modi, and after all, the government doesn't want the no confidence motion to be discussed on the floor of the House. That will expose the government. That is why all these MPs who are in the well, they are not from all opposition parties. These members who are in the well are from those parties which are friendly to the BJP and to the government. I can tell you that today, yesterday, no opposition MPs were in the well except these two or three parties. No opposition MPs, no major opposition parties MPs were in the well. We had demanded on the floor of the House, and also we had met the Honorable Speaker and demanded that the House should function. That is our position.
Okay. That actually has fueled a lot of conspiracy theorists in New Delhi to say, is the government actually egging on the TRS and the AIADMK to do this? Because the moment they are in the well, the speaker puts up a hand and says there isn't enough quorum for that no confidence motion to be moved, and so I'm not moving it, and the first thing she does is resorts to an adjournment. And there is a conspiracy in New Delhi which says that maybe this is being done at the behest of the government. But a more uncomfortable question, Nalan Kohli, is that does it suit the government to not have the parliament functions, no questions asked and no answers given? You're not going to discuss the PNB scam, you don't have to discuss the banking mess, no job losses, no agrarian stress. It's very simple. It also works in the government's favor as much as it does for anybody else to not have the houses function.
Supriya, my audio keeps coming and going, so I'm assuming that question is for me. Should I answer that?
Absolutely. Yes, Mr. Kohli, this is for you. Go ahead. That question is for you, Mr. Kohli.
Okay. So I'm sorry there's a delay because of our distance. But I don't believe in conspiracy theories. Through the 50s, 60s, 70s, particularly the 70s, there used to be this theory of the hidden foreign hand that was guiding India or trying to disrupt democracy here. I don't think we should believe and subscribe to conspiracy theories. The government is pretty pained that the fact Parliament is not there. You've heard both the chairman of the upper house as well as the speaker of the Lok Sabha saying it today while when we had the issue of the Iraq 39 Indians who died. You could see the anguish when she was also saying that, the kind of words she used, and they were pretty strong and words driven out of emotion. Sushma ji has spoken about it. So I think a solution can be found. It's not that Parliament has not transacted business in the past, and the credit goes to Parliament. If you are talking of the no confidence motion, then you can't have both the situations where those who want a no confidence motion, they also disrupt Parliament. The counter theory that can be also propagated is that they are purposely disrupting the House because they don't have the numbers for the no confidence motion. So, this counter theory doesn't really get Parliament functioning in any way. It's important that Parliament should function, and that's in the larger interest. Anything can be discussed. In the last session also, we spoke about it on one of our shows. I think it was with you only, that any subject can be discussed, but it has to be as per rules and it has to be as per procedure. It can't be just brought up. And Milind, as he rightly pointed out, that he's addressed Parliament as a young and now a little more experienced member of Parliament. He also knows those rules are there. But disruption, if it took place in the House today, on at least an issue where we were discussing the death of Indian citizens by a terrible organization like ISIS, perhaps that was a little bit too far. On other issues, maybe we can find reasons why there are disruptions, why they should not be, etc. But on that, I personally feel that was really a low. Because at the end of the day, terrorists eliminated 39 people. And now when we have the news, that's the death of 39 universes. So it's a pretty sad and terrible story. So I felt at least even the Rajya Sabha, it could have functioned. The Lok Sabha would have done well also to have let the minister make her statement.
What explains this complete breakdown of communication between the opposition and the government, Milind Deora? Sagarika spoke about it earlier as well. And like Nalin Kohli is saying, on a sensitive issue like the death of citizens of this country in Iraq by ISIS, again we've still had disruption. The government is blaming the opposition for stalling Parliament, even on a day like today. What explains this complete breakdown of trust and communication between? We've had differences. There have been disagreements in the past as well, but this seems like a new low. What according to you explains this level of breakdown of trust and communication between the opposition and the government? Milind Deora.
Let me, Sandeep, try and move away, because I think we're going around in circles. We're just blaming each other and we're not really answering the question and offering viewers a solution.
Sure.
I've just jotted down a few points while I was sort of listening to the other panelists. And let me just tell you what my experience has taught me. And this is my personal opinion. It's not my party's opinion of what I think is the problem today. Number one, I think there are 5 reasons why I think Parliament is being disrupted. I think number one, I agree with Sagarika's point that there is a lot of hostility between the government and the opposition. It's a very confrontational relationship. It's not one of camaraderie and healthy competition. And that is something which is unfortunate. My message to both political parties, or to all political parties, is I think we all need to take a chill pill, dial it down a little bit, and figure out how we can work together, at least on key areas on the economy, on foreign policy, on other issues. Number 2, and I think this is a very important area, is that while we blame MPs and party A, party B, party C, I think it's very important to understand that we, as voters, what do we reward in an MP? Unfortunately, even in a constituency like South Mumbai, even in a city like Mumbai, voters don't look at their MP's performance in Parliament as much as they look at whether the MP has solved their water problem, their road problem, whether there's garbage on the streets, which are really issues relating to an MLA, which is a member of the state legislature, or even that of a municipal councillor. And as a result, there is no reward mechanism for parliamentarians to be focused on parliamentary procedures, raise important issues, take part in debates, attend Parliament. That's the second point I want to make, and this is based on my own experience. I think the third point, which is unique to this Parliament, I do believe that in 2014 there was a Modi wave, and I think in that Modi wave what happened is that voters in many constituencies in this country actually overlooked good candidates, and they voted in a presidential way, and they elected a prime minister, ignoring people who could serve them better, represent them better. As a result, there have been some, I'm sure Chakshu and others have some data on this, but there have been others who've shown me some data, that the quality of MPs has come down drastically in this Lok Sabha compared to the past. The fourth point I'd like to make is, when RTI came out, and I spoke about how I initiated the debate on RTI, if you look at my speech, it's on YouTube in 2005, I actually said that RTI could actually disrupt Question R, because Question R was a system devised by those who were the founders of our country to ensure that, since we're a representative democracy, that if a constituent wants his or her voice to be heard and to ask a question of a particular minister, they would do that through their MP. With RTI, they didn't need their MP. They could do it directly. They could directly ask the ministry that question, and as a result, they would get an answer within a stipulated period of time. Otherwise, it was deemed illegal. So as a result, questionnaire just became redundant. And that's why you see the massive disruptions happening in questionnaire, because now there's no longer pressure on MPs from constituents to raise important issues in parliament during questionnaire. And the fifth point that I want to make, which I think is a very critical point, which is your responsibility, Sandeep and Supriya. I've seen many debates in parliament that I've participated in, very important debates on the economy, on foreign policy, on administrative reforms, on critical issues in this country, and not a line gets reported when the House functions well.
Right.
The minute the House gets disrupted, it's headline news, there are 9 p.m. primetime debates. So even the media has a role to play in this.
Right.
The media also wants to just sensationalize the information.
Right.
They don't want to actually get down to reporting the good stuff that happens. And all of this put together, I think, discourages voters, constituents, and MPs from being driven to actually perform in Parliament and in New Delhi. So those are the 5 solutions that I wanted to suggest, which I think, based on my experience, have contributed to this problem.
I'm glad at least we are talking about solutions that will help in resolving this deadlock of sorts. But Sagarika, I wanted to respond to some of the points that Milind has put forward, and some of them perhaps are pragmatic and can be adopted. But the other question also is that, you know, we've seen worse political standoff. We've seen worse political face-offs between the government and the opposition, not just in this government, but even in the previous government. It's the backroom channels that get at work. You have floor managers. There are people who reach out to the opposition, whether it's through a lunch or a tea or whatever else. You know, those backroom channels of negotiation and dialogue, to my mind, have completely failed. Why do you believe that has happened, and do you believe there is scope for those to be revived? Because parliamentary democracy works on certain principles, and one of the principles is that you can be very bitter in parliament, but these backroom channels help you open and give you elbow room to negotiate, to have a dialogue, to talk. I think that's completely choked.
Absolutely right. The backroom channels are completely choked because of the complete breakdown of relations, Supriya and Sandeep, and also because at this moment every party is in election mode. Every party is gearing up for 2019. They simply don't want to take parliament seriously. They're not inclined to take parliament seriously. You know, as Milind pointed out, yes, whether an MP gets elected or not no longer depends on his performance in parliament. You know, earlier in times we had Pilu Modi, Minu Masani, George Fernandez. How they performed in parliament was critical to their electability. Electability now is based on caste, religion, local factors. You can make, you know, garma garam bhashans in parliament. It doesn't affect your electability in any way. So MPs have little incentive to perform in parliament. But on the other hand, at this moment in time, we're seeing a complete focus only on the elections of 2019. That is what parties are geared towards. Let's look at the no confidence motion. I mean, the government actually is completely safe. It has 335 MPs along with its allies. Even with the TDP walking out, is down to 319. The Shiv Sena has said that it will abstain, so the majority mark comes down. So the government is completely safe. It has nothing to fear for its own survival. The question is, why then is it not even allowing a debate? And I know that Mr. Nalin Kohli is saying that conspiracy theories are not what he believes in, but why is it that the AIA-DMK MPs only are the ones who are going into the well of the house and screaming about Kaveri water dispute? They are the ones repeatedly disrupting the house. And the question also must be asked, Supriya and Sandeep, on the role of the speaker. The fact is, why does the speaker not call an all-party meeting? Why does both the speaker, the Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha, not call an all-party meeting, start the communication process, as you said, start a negotiation process, and let the parties come together to see whether the logjam can be broken? The fact of the matter is, nobody wants to break the logjam. Nobody wants to end the stalemate, because everybody is focused only on one thing now. They are all poised towards the 2019 elections. As you know, there is not only a first front of the BJP, a second front of the Congress, a third front of the BSP, SP. We now even have a fourth front of Mr. Chandrasekhar Rao and Mamta Banerjee. So all these parties are now jostling for position, getting ready for the 2019 election, and therefore I believe that the 16th Lok Sabha is dead, which is a terribly unfortunate thing, because as we've said, you know, and I just think one point I just want to make, you know, Sandeep, the FCRA amendment has been rammed through by the government, and the FCRA amendment is extremely important because it exempts from scrutiny retrospective donations since 1976.
Yeah, and it suits both the BJP and Congress. And it's an amendment that suits both BJP and Congress. Sagarika, we will debate that.
Untransparent act.
Sure, Sagarika, we will debate that. But I want Nalin Kohli to respond to a point that you made a little while earlier on the role of the Speaker. And Nalin Kohli, why is the Speaker not being proactive, calling for an all-party meeting? You know, I take Milind Deora's points on board. These are sort of medium-term, long-term solutions. But I'm more worried about the session that's in play right now. I'm more worried about the 16th Lok Sabha. Sagarika is already calling it a dead session. So, why isn't the Speaker being proactive? What about the role of the Speaker trying to break the deadlock, get all parties on board? Why is that not happening, Nalin Kohli?
First, I am an eternal optimist. So, therefore, I won't call the 16th Parliament or Lok Sabha dead yet. Because even in the past, and I'm talking in this last 4 years, there have been instances of great fractional discord, if I may call it, between the Treasury and the opposition benches. But then everyone have risen to the occasion too. So therefore, I'm an eternal optimist, and I would hope that Sagarika on this is completely wrong. And I don't think she would feel bad in being wrong on this either. So, you know, let's wait to see. The second is with regard to the role of the Speaker. I think there are mechanisms also in terms of the parliamentary setup beyond the Speaker that do try to ensure that Parliament does function. With regard to what happens in Parliament, really that is the prerogative of the Parliament, because that's a mechanism of its own. I want to take a moment also, you know, to bring in some of compliment, of course, Milind for some very, very sensible points that he took away from the fact of, you know, being it a political debate and speaking on his personal accord and from his experience. There were some points there that merit, consideration. An additional point I'd like to add on a very personal note is that we need to also understand that elections are now round the clock. And in a 24/7 news cycle, every election is treated almost with the same importance. A by-poll, a municipal poll, a state by-election or a parliamentary by-election, a full legislative assembly election, and now, of course, whenever the Lok Sabha election takes place. So in that news cycle, when everything is so political and elections are so political, the shadow of it is going to fall on the larger functioning of democracy. And therefore, at least some of us, the Prime Minister has been speaking about simultaneous polls. But yes, I think there is a need to debate some of these things beyond it, because all of these are interconnected. It's not some of the points that Milind brought and, you know, what I'm pointing out. These are all interconnected. They are not out of that, information pool that has an impact on Parliament and its functioning in some way or the other.
Yes. Yeah, but Mr. Kohli, you know, elections have happened not together in the past as well, and parliaments have functioned. But yeah, your point well taken there. I'll go across to the man who's perhaps bearing the brunt of this parliament.
But the media wasn't a 24-hour media. You have to look at that too. It's changed in the last 10 years.
All right, blame it on us. Blame it on us when in doubt. But Mr. M.B. Rajesh, who represents the Palakkad constituency and is perhaps bearing the brunt, what worries me a little is that parliamentarians themselves are willing to dilute their legislative authority, their legislative duties. If I may just point out some figures to you, UPA 1 referred 60% of the bills to the Lok Sabha committees, UPA 2 referred 70% of the bills, whereas the Modi government has only referred 27% of the bills to the committees. To add this data, whereas UPA 1 introduced 246 and 228 bills, the Modi Sarkar has only brought 146 bills in the Lok Sabha. What is happening? Why is Parliament doing away with its duty to dissent, to debate, to discuss, to scrutinize? Can Parliament afford to be just a rubber stamp? There is a lot that gets added to these bills when they go to these committees in Parliament.
See, in the last 4 years, all constitutional institutions, all institution in our country has suffered. And of course, Parliament has also suffered. There has been bypassing of Parliament. We have heard that one of the ministers initiated a debate whether we actually need Rajya Sabha, a council of states, because the ruling party has not yet got majority in Rajya Sabha. So since there is no majority in Rajya Sabha, then we need to debate whether Rajya Sabha actually is required. So that kind of bypassing, and we have seen how ordinances were promulgated just before the parliament session, how Rajya Sabha has been bypassed by bringing bills as money bills just to bypass Rajya Sabha where the ruling party has no majority. So all these have eroded the authority of parliament. All these have contributed to the erosion of legislative powers of parliament. Yes, of course, these parliamentary committees are meant for meaningful discussion and more scrutiny of various legislations. Since this government is unwilling to have meaningful discussions and scrutiny of important bills, they are reluctant to send bills to parliamentary committees. So the issue is very serious. This issue should be seen in the backdrop of general erosion of our constitutional and parliamentary institutions. Number two, out of this logjam, who is going to benefit? The only beneficiary of this current logjam, politically, the only beneficiary is BJP and of course the government led by BJP. That is why the government is reluctant to end this logjam. At the time of GST, I admit that the Prime Minister himself intervened and he took initiative and he had breakfast meeting with opposition leaders. He even rang up to opposition leaders to end the logjam and to facilitate the passage of GST. Why the Prime Minister or anybody from the government, they are not willing to end this logjam, the current logjam? And regarding the role of Speaker, we have seen that House Speaker allowed the passage of finance bill amidst this disturbance and disruption, which authorized government to spend lakhs of crores of rupees. And the Speaker allowed the passage of finance bill amidst this disturbance and disruption. But
absolutely, I think I take that point.
She cannot take up the no confidence motion since the House is not in motion.
Okay,
since the House is not in order.
I take that point, and let me ask that to Chakshu Roy. You know, finance bill, we can't not talk about it as a business channel. It pains me the finance bill of the state of the government of India is passed without any discussion, and specifically the clause, the retrospective amendments on the FCRA, like Shagarika pointed out, was passed without any discussion. The opposition, which sort of never lets go any opportunity to attack the government, didn't even blink because it suits them both. This is a law that's been retroactively moved by 42 years. Chakshu Roy, what kind of a precedence does this set? Or, is it just a case of political convenience really for all parties here? And are we looking at MPs who only care about elections, or scoring brownie points like some of the other panelists were making here in this 24/7, election cycle? And that's what, at the end of the day, politicians care about.
When MPs look at the role in Parliament, I think the role in Parliament as legislators, rises above their role in Parliament as representative of political parties. So when political parties get together, and pass a contentious piece of legislation without debate, and sometimes the legislation is contentious and sometimes the legislation is just convenient because all parties agree on it and parties agree to pass legislation without debate. I think neither of these are healthy precedents for a democracy. If there is a piece of legislation, be it financial or otherwise, parties, even if they agree on it, they still need to debate and thrash out the nuances of all pieces of legislation. Now, be it changes to FCRA or any other, bill that was, any other provision of the finance bill that was discussed. Every time that we stop doing that, we put together a very unhealthy precedent in the functioning of a democracy.
All right, we put out a very unhealthy precedent in democracy, but I'm going to just quote the former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and he says, and Nalan Kohli, I want to come to you on this. He says at the heart of the politics is the BJP's assumption that they can run the country without the opposition, without the Congress party. Given your stellar electoral track record, has the BJP assumed somewhere that political democracy can function without the opposition, can function without the Congress party? And is that the matter at the heart of all the political controversy and political bitterness, like Manmohan Singh points out?
Two comments. The first on your question is Dr. Manmohan Singh obviously is entitled to have a point of view. That's a political point. I'm not going to get into a battle with that because that's his point of view. But certainly from the other side, you can't have democracy without an opposition. It's an impossibility. Otherwise, how would it be a democracy? The second point that I wanted to make was I was only responding in the last segment and adding to some of the excellent points that my friend Milind raised. And mine was not an attack on the media. I'm just simply pointing out that in the news cycle, this is also an impact. So if you are talking in a constructive manner, don't take everything as a reaction to, criticism and trying to blame the media. You are reporting, and that's your element of wanting to decide your editorial thing, what you wish to report. I was only taking the discussion in a slightly different direction because I thought Milind had made some very, very valuable contributions.
Enough. And I take on board the points made by Milind, but the point is, at the end of the day, there is, and you would appreciate Nalin and Milind as well, that there is some amount of anger today and among large sections of society at the fact that this is just becoming, routine. And people wonder, does it pain the political class? Are politicians pained enough by it to do something about it? And that's the reason, why we're going back. Sandeep, it's not like as if we want to pin the blame at all, and that's not the idea. Our debates are not about sort of scoring, trying to theatrics and sort of pinning blame.
I'm not making another blame either. I'm merely pointing out my view.
Fair enough. No, I have a specific question. No, the reason it's not as if we don't want to talk about the 5 points made by Milind.
Something else to bear in mind.
Sure. I take that point on board. But Milind, just as Supriya asked Nalin the point.
So I just want to add one thing on the anger thing. It's not just Parliament. Actually, we need to recognize there's anger all around. It's not just Parliament. There's anger in terms of entitlement, anger about delivery, there's anger about not getting basics. So actually, we need to bear that, and that's not just an India factor, that's a global factor. You only just need to see how reactionary the world today is. But that doesn't take us away from this debate. That's a separate debate by itself. I
take that. But, Milind, just as Supriya asked Naren about the point made by Dr. Manmohan Singh and whether the government is not, has scant regard for opposition, one would argue that does the opposition, and as a senior member of the Congress party, it's only fair that we ask you this question, is the opposition not respecting the political mandate of the government of the day? The fact that here is a government that has, overwhelming majority to frame policies, is the opposition at one level in denial of the political mandate that the people of this country have bestowed on the government of the day?
No, not on important legislations that we were propagating and BJP was opposing when we were in power, such as GST, the insurance bill, we would have played politics and not helped them pass it. So our track record, even as an opposition, has been in some ways better than BJP's track record as an opposition. But again, my experience, and I hate to politicize this, and I've tried to steer clear of politicizing this debate, but there is a difference between this BJP's parliamentary party and the BJP parliamentary party that was in the opposition when we were in power for 10 years. I was thinking about it while listening to people. I can list down so many instances when I was an MP, when I was a minister. I remember, for instance, when the Lokpal bill was being discussed and debated, at one point when Pranab Mukherjee was the finance minister at the time, and there was a deadlock with opposition, with all political parties in the House as to how to go about the Lokpal bill. And we had Mr. Arun Jaitley, who was the leader of opposition in the Rajya Sabha, who agreed to come into Mr. Mukherjee's office. There was few of us from the UPA who were in government. Mr. Advani, Mr. Jaitley walked in, and within about a 45-minute tea break in a private cabin, there was a discussion and they agreed to work together and pass that bill. Something similar happened with land acquisition in 2013 September, which was just 6 months before UPA 2. So I'm hopeful things can happen. I wouldn't agree with Sagarika, my friend, that we should be very, very pessimistic and this is election year and nothing can happen. If land acquisition, BJP, Congress could bury their differences, come together barely 6 months before the UPA 2, when there was a very shrill rhetoric in the country, we were on the back foot, the opposition was very aggressive. In spite of that, we could come together and work for the country and pass a historic legislation, which was amending 100-year-old legislation laid down by the British. So But I do believe that there is, unfortunately, and I don't want to put Nalin on the spot here, but there is a difference between the BJP parliamentary party of today and the one of the last 10, 15, perhaps even 20 years.
Okay.
In the past, the opposition, Congress, BJP primarily, and other parties were able to see eye to eye. They were able to talk to one another, to strike a deal, and to make parliament function and to pass important legislations. I see a complete breakdown of that today. Again, I'm not going to get into politicizing it, into blaming individual A or B, but certainly the ego levels of this government and of parliament today are far higher than they were in the past.
Okay. I think not just ego levels of this government, but animosity on the side of the opposition benches as well. But Sagarika, that's exactly the question that I want to ask you. We've seen very bitter political jibes being made at each other in election rallies and all of that. But once you were in the house, people would meet, greet each other, ask on families, there would be camaraderie. All of that has gone missing. I go to parliament and I feel there's one camp and then there's the enemy camp. And if you're in one camp, you can't be interacting with people from the other camp. So the animosity levels are extremely high, at least in this parliament. The animosity perhaps is being imported inside the house, but the larger question is parliamentarians today, and with all due respect, want to discuss and debate some of the very relevant issues of the day, whether it's job losses, whether it's agrarian stress, whether it's the PNB scam. They'd much rather discuss that on television screens than within the August House. What has led to that?
Supriya, as we have been saying in this discussion, democracy is about a set of shared norms, a set of shared truths, a set of rules that everybody accepts. You have to accept the rules of democracy. A massive mandate, and Sandeep asked this question to Milind, a massive mandate doesn't mean that you can override the institutions of democracy, because democracy is about institutions, it's about the separation of powers. A very whimsical point one can make here is that when a leader gets a massive mandate, he always ends up subverting institutions like Indira Gandhi did, and coalition governments, actually, I know they are much abused, but they tend to be a check on these towering personality figures that tend to subvert institutions. But having said that, institutions are important, shared notions of democratic norms are important. So, as is said, you don't want to destroy the opposition physically. You have to defeat the opposition in argument. That's democracy. And the reason why this is important is because people's representatives are accountable to guess who? To the people, to us. It's our money, our taxpayers' money. The people need to see debate. The people need to see what's happening to the cesses we're paying, to the taxes we're paying. The union budget is made up of all the cesses and the taxes that we are paying. So we need to know what is happening to this money. The people's representatives owe it to us. It is their responsibility to the citizen of India, to the taxpayer of India, to have an open debate and to work out and to tell us what they intend to do with the money. Equally, it is the opposition's responsibility to ask questions and to hold the government accountable. But you see, the level of personal animosity, the hyper-polarization of our politics. Our politics is not just polarized, it's hyper-polarized. Our society is hyper-polarized. Our polity is hyper-polarized, and in this hyper-polarization where everybody is in their ideological silos, there is really no room for debate and discussion. So it's a very tragic and unfortunate thing, and that is why I say that the 16th Lok Sabha is as good as dead.
Well, I hope what you say doesn't turn out to be true, but couldn't agree more with some of what you said, especially on a hyper-polarized polity. But Chakshu, closing comments really, let me continue and let's look at solutions. Milind raised some points as well. What do you think should be done to ensure proper functioning of the parliament without taking away the right of politicians to protest and dissent, which is absolutely necessary as well?
The way forward is, what are the institutional mechanisms that we can build within a parliamentary system which makes sure that parties have to come together to a negotiating table to pass certain things? I'll give an example. When the GST bill was being passed, it was a constitutional amendment bill, there was a requirement for a two-third majority in the House to get it passed, right? Which means that you couldn't pass the bill, amongst disturbance, which means you couldn't pass the bill without debate. right? Can we build similar kind of mechanisms for key legislation? Finance bill is one of them, right? This is a bill which is a technical bill in nature, does not go to a parliamentary standing committee to be scrutinized, and then when it gets passed without debate, I don't think that's a good idea. But how do you force both the treasury benches and the different opposition parties to come to the table and talk? And one way to do that is to ensure that the procedure does not allow something to be passed by a voice vote. And probably it's a good idea that finance bill should not be passed by a voice vote but by recorded voting. And we can set the threshold. The threshold could be a 50% of the House, or threshold could be 2/3 of the House. But some kind of a recorded voting will ensure that these things don't get passed in a voice vote or don't get passed when the House is not in order.
All right, as a sitting MP of this Lok Sabha, Mr. Rajesh, what are the solutions that you would put forward on the table? And we've got instances in the past when parliamentarians could set aside partisan differences and get together for the larger purpose of legislative decisions to be made, for larger purposes of lawmaking, for larger national interests. What do you believe are the solutions that one needs to arrive at to ensure our parliament thrives, functions, scrutinizes, debates, dissents, but functions?
The immediate solution to end this logjam, the current logjam, is that the government and the speaker should be willing to accept the offer of opposition for cooperation. The opposition has offered our cooperation for the House to function. And I don't understand why the government and why the speaker is reluctant to accept that offer. That means that the government doesn't want the House to function. And in the past, I had just mentioned about the GST. At the time of the passage of GST, to ensure 2/3 majority to facilitate the passing of constitutional amendment, Prime Minister himself initiated talks to end the logjam. Prime Minister had breakfast meetings, etc. Why the government is not taking such an initiative in order to facilitate discussion of banking scam, the agrarian distress, job losses, and after all, the no confidence motion. That is why I am saying that the only beneficiary of this current logjam is nobody else but BJP and the government.
Right, on that note, completely out of time on this edition of the India Development Debate. We've discussed the Parliament logjam, we've discussed the cost it entails, we've discussed whether this is going to lead to an erosion of Parliament's own relevance, and we have discussed of some of the possible solutions that can be put forward. Parliamentarians have been elected by the people of this country to go in Parliament, make the laws, scrutinize them, dissent and debate them. To not make the House function is really going to do no good to anybody. Thank you, this wonderful panel, for being with us on this edition of the India Development Debate.
Don't go anywhere. News and updates continue right here on ET Now. Many thanks to all our panelists for joining us on this special edition of the India Development Debate.